for joining us for our first show of 2016. We hope you had a happy and safe new year. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently tonight if you've been a loyal listener. Instead of interviewing a guest, the two of us will be having an informal discussion about our work as music therapists. Just so happens that this month is Music Therapy Advocacy Month, so feel free to join our conversation on social media by tweeting us at PBMTI or calling the show at 888-565-1470. First, I'd like to share a little bit about my background as a music therapist. I was raised in the Orlando, Florida area. I was always involved in music from the time I was a child. I was always interested in singing and dancing and acting, kind of got involved in community theater as a kid and took voice lessons for a long time. So when it came time to look for potential college majors, I decided to look at a College of Music website through Florida State University. My parents actually had the Florida prepaid college plan. So on their website, I discovered that music therapy was an option for a major, and I had no idea what that was. So I read more about it, found the American Music Therapy Association webpage, and decided that I was really passionate about this field, and that's how I kind of learned about it and went to Florida State University, got my bachelor's degree, and then wound up coming down here to Southeast Florida for my required 6-month clinical internship at what was formerly known as Hospice of Palm Beach County and is now Trustbridge Health. After my internship, I went back to Florida State for my master's degree, and they couldn't keep me away down here. And after I graduated, I came on back and now working full-time as a music therapist at Trustbridge Health and doing some contract work for Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute as well. So if you've been an avid listener, I was on a few months ago talking about my work at Trustbridge Health, and Brian Howley is also a past radio show interviewee.
Hello.
He was speaking of his work with a current client a couple months ago as well. Brian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work as a music therapist?
Absolutely. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, upstate. Whoop, whoop, go Rhinos. And so I first, got interested in music kind of in high school, started doing some shows, musicals and things like that. Got into Grease and The Wiz and all that. And from there, kind of wanted to do something with music, but I really wasn't sure where to go with it, do teaching, performing. And eventually found out through a family friend who happens to be a music therapist about music therapy. She owned her own small business practice. And so that, kind of allowed me the time to find out more about it from there. But anyway, kind of getting ahead of myself, though. I should kind of jump back, though. Before finding out about it, though, I started to go to school and then figured out, maybe I could do this as a major. So just so happens in New York, there's a school, Nazareth College, has a music therapy major, and I was interested in that. And when I looked into it, I figured, maybe I could do this, and decided to transfer there, where I had my primary was voice, and took on voice lessons from there. And after 3 years, managed to get my my degree in music therapy. So from there, after finishing at Nazareth, I got my bachelor's. I did my internship at Hospice Inc. in Poughkeepsie, New York. It's a very small hospice, only I think 100 patients at the time on the census. So I mean, dwarfed by the size of course, Trustbridge.
Right. As a comparison, I think Trustbridge now we have close to 2,000 patients.
That's a bit more.
A little fraction of the size of what we're dealing with down here.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting. Maybe we can talk more about this later. But have the differences between small and big hospices. But that was kind of a neat experience getting to start there as my internship, and then as I finished, after doing that for getting all my clinical hours in. And then passed my board certification exam, which made me really sweat. We did that, and then went to move on down to South Florida after finding out about, at the time called Hospice of Palm Beach County, now Trustbridge, and worked there for a couple of years, 2 years, before starting to do some private contract work and seeing the client who I was on the radio show talking about. So that kind of got me into sort of where I am now. That's kind of the general path of how I came to be. So, yeah.
I kind of had a similar experience in that sense of having that experience finding out about music therapy, but what we haven't talked about is how once we're in the field of music therapy, there are several different populations that we can choose to work with, which if you've been listening to the show, you'll have some perspective of the variety of different clients that we see here in the area, especially from community settings to educational settings to medical settings to hospice settings where I'm at. So as we mentioned, Brian and I both worked at Trustbridge Health, which is where we met. And Brian, how did you pick the route of the hospice population? What made you decide to choose that instead of the other populations that music therapists work with?
It's, yeah, you know, I wish I could say it was a thrilling tale. It was kind of more of a over time, slowly but surely kind of thing. When I started trying some of the populations at school at Nazareth, we had a chance to work with 4 different populations, and they randomized them almost. You know, I worked with kids with developmental disabilities. I worked with elderly. And I also remember working with, oh my goodness, adults with developmental disabilities as well. And one more that I'm not thinking of right now, but it'll probably come to me in like 5 minutes. Anyway, so after working with a few of those populations, then I started to go to more conferences and kept finding myself going to all the courses that had to do with working in hospice, talking about death and dying and the process and ethics of that, which I think we coincidentally were at that same, we were at the same conference. This was in Ohio.
Before we had met.
Before we met, this is, it's kind of funny coincidence. And we afterwards, after finding each other, then found out, oh my God, we went to the same exact class taught by Lauren DeMaio. I remember that. I think it was the ethics of hospice.
Yep.
I think that, honestly, that class was really a big point for me in deciding, okay, I'm definitely going to do this. I'm going to do hospice as an internship site. And then that's where I found out about Hospice Inc. from there. So what about you, though? How, what made you decide to really get into hospice in particular versus other populations?
Like you said, I was drawn to the hospice sessions and the hospice topics at conference as well. But it was more so because I had a personal experience with family members in the hospice setting, and I always kind of valued that philosophy of care, that comfort care, and the hospice philosophy of really valuing the whole person. And it's a holistic based model, so we're not just addressing physical needs in hospice care, we're addressing emotional, spiritual, and psychosocial needs as well as the physical needs. So I thought that was really interesting. And having family members go through the hospice program, I actually had a chance while I was a music therapy student to see one of my family members receive a music therapy service from one of my coworkers now, which is kind of funny.
That is the craziest.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. This is probably one of the best stories that I have throughout my work as a music therapist. When my grandfather was in hospice and down here actually in South Florida in a nursing home, one of my coworkers was his music therapist at the time. I was a freshman in college, so I was studying to be a music therapist and was kind of having this experience while I was in school. And the crazier thing is when I got down here and started working as a music therapist, I got to experience being an internship supervisor for the first time. And my very first music therapy intern was actually the granddaughter of one of the patients that both Brian and I worked with. So it was kind of a very small world. We're all connected, and a very interesting story. But
it really, it is crazy how small the world of music therapy in general, it kind of feels. Eventually you kind of cross paths with people that, what are the odds that you would end up having the internship supervisor of somebody that actually saw your family member in hospital. I mean, that's just like,
Absolutely.
how can you?
We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue our discussion about our work as music therapists here in Southeast Florida. Stick around. We'll be right back after these commercials.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer. Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show.
Good evening. You are listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We are your guest hosts, Elisa Avon and Brian Hallilay, filling in for Bree Beynon. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we're having an informal discussion about our work here as music therapists in Palm Beach and Broward counties. Before the break, we were sharing a little bit about our backgrounds as music therapists and our work here in the community as music therapists. Kind of sharing a little bit about how we chose the populations that we work with currently, and a little bit about how we found out about music therapy.
Yeah, how we got to where we are now.
Yeah.
But, along the way, you kind of get quite a few stories from working in this kind of field. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and share maybe some nice moments that you've had while you're in your experience in the field?
The first one and the most memorable one for me actually happened during my internship. I had a patient in one of our inpatient units here, and I had seen her for the first time, and she was pretty minimally responsive. She was kind of nearing end of life, comatose, pretty non-responsive. And I went in and played a few songs. She really didn't have much reaction to the music. So the next day when I was there at the inpatient unit, I decided to check up on her again, and happened that her family was there for that session. I think it was her spouse and a daughter, as well as one of our hospice volunteers was in the room too. And the patient's family requested the song Amazing Grace. And so I played that song at the bedside. The patient was still pretty comatose, and hearing the song, towards the end of the song, the patient actually opened her eyes and mouthed the words, "I love you," to her husband. And she hadn't been awake for days. And so I really felt that the music and the music therapy session helped her to stimulate her enough to be able to have that alertness and be able to share that last meaningful moment with her family. And that's something that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. I remember the husband saying to me, like, the music did this, it woke her up. And those are the moments that are really, really rewarding for me.
I mean, what better evidence do you need? I mean, just having that kind of moment, especially when you have the chance to bring that out of a client, and especially at that kind of time, end of life, and they appreciate it so much. I mean, words can't express kind of stuff. I mean,
absolutely. Those are the things we as music therapists call our music therapy moments, or the moment that kind of help us remember why we got into this field, and are very rewarding to us as clinicians.
Absolutely. I remember too, I think my first music therapy moment for me kind of started in my internship. I was really fortunate to work with, so far to date, my youngest client that I had. She was in her early 30s, and she had a diagnosis of mesothelioma, and which was, you know, kind of surprising learning about that, and okay, finding the story behind that. And then
What is that, if you don't mind me asking?
well, it has to do with the lungs. It's typically caused by asbestos, breathing it into the lungs, and then it unfortunately causes degradation from there. So in her case, it ended up being her primary diagnosis. So what was kind of interesting, though, and I felt really fortunate about, was, you know, she was pretty artistic, and initially she wanted to actually learn guitar as one of her main goals for our sessions. I thought, oh, this is great. Okay, I can do this, and I can kind of teach this to her. I hadn't really taught guitar to many people or that much, so I was like, okay, a little nervous, but I decided to give it a shot. And then through that, when we were talking, okay, well, maybe you could work on guitar. Oh, well, you know, you can write your own songs. You can do whatever. Oh, well, actually, I do write some poetry. So it turns out she had this huge stack of binders full of poetry.
Wow.
That she had written all through her college years and up until present day. And, you know, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is perfect. You can use those lyrics and turn them, or use those poems and turn them right into lyrics for songwriting. I mean, that's brilliant.
Absolutely.
So what ended up starting out as learning guitar turned into a songwriting intervention. And to continue on from there, you know, we ended up finding the perfect poem that, you know, she approved, rewrote it in a format that was good for a song, because sometimes, you know, the format's not always right. You got to kind of tweak it. We chose what her guitar licks that she liked were. I gave her some samples, and she said, this works, not that one, this one, that one, not that one. And then when we combined those, we ended up making what became her song. And then to round it all out, it just so happens that our final project for our internship is when we record a song from our time as interns, and make a copy of his CD. And it just so happens my internship supervisor, her husband, is very into recording. He has his own studio, all this stuff. And so I end up recording this song for the client, playing her own song, making a CD, and then giving her the CD as kind of a, you know, thank you for your time, and here's a product that you made. And it's just a final, you know, to sum it all up with a big bow on top, it turns out that she's been writing songs with interns ever since that first time that we wrote that song.
So you were kind of the first one to instigate this whole process of her songwriting.
Yes, which is huge. I can't even.
Yeah.
I can't even.
That's amazing. What an incredible story.
Crazy, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah.
What about you?
Along those same lines, actually, kind of a songwriting story.
Mm-hmm.
I had a patient who was a musician and was kind of suffering from a bit of memory loss in his later years, and couldn't remember the details of his life necessarily. But when he heard some songs that he had written, he knew every single word to those songs, would sing along with them, would have memories from recording the song. It's just amazing, you know, the power of music to bring that out of him. And he had suffered a stroke and wasn't able to play the guitar any longer, and was a really talented songwriter. And I felt like this was an amazing opportunity to work on songwriting with him, and help facilitate that emotional expression, and tap into that talent that he had still. Just didn't have the independence or the ability to really do it on his own, but with help was able to write a song with me about his love for music and how much it's meant to his life. So that was a really neat experience.
What can you tell what kind of process you used for songwriting with him? Was it anything in particular how you went about it?
I kind of tried a variety of things. I wasn't really sure what was going to work best for this particular patient, but I have the GarageBand application on my iPad, which I find really handy. I like to kind of start with having the patient pick a drum beat, through this application and then kind of add different instrumentation on top and then kind of work on the lyrics after that. But everyone has their own process, and I was really trying to figure out what this patient's process was, since he was a songwriter and a musician. So he said he kind of did both at the same time. Like, he would come up with the lyrics and the melody both together, which is different from the process that I'm comfortable with. And so I kind of had to work with that. And
that can be tricky. You know, I think, especially when you're doing songwriting interventions, a lot of times, you know, people are very sensitive about the whole process of songwriting, even trying it for the first time, if I may. But you're right. I mean, everybody kind of has a process that works for them, and it's hard to kind of adapt to maybe something you're used to what your client maybe prefers.
Absolutely.
Or trying stuff on the fly and hoping it works and that they don't get discourhed or anything like that, you know. That can be tricky.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, I'm not the most talented songwriter of all songwriters. I mean, that's not really like a class we had in school or anything.
No, I wish it was.
Right.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
something that we kind of just have to learn as we go and kind of get better at, and hopefully attend sessions at conferences and things of that nature. But you know, I kind of just like to give the patient the choice of, you know, how do you like what this sounds like, or how do you like these lyrics, and just make it all about their preference and kind of work on creating an end product through that process.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the product is the process, I think, you know, and it's nice when you can sum it up into a nice little final bow on the end, but really, yeah, if they can feel good about it in the end, then, you know, that's really the main goal.
And I think too, like, the confidence of having been able to write a song, you know, when this particular patient hadn't been able to do that in years, I think was the therapy process.
Right. Giving him back the kind of ability that
and the sense of
have.
who he is and was. Like, I am a musician.
Yes.
You know, I am a songwriter, and that identity was kind of destroyed after he, you know, got sick. And so having that back was very powerful.
It's beautiful
for him.
Being able to bring that back to who he is and remember what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Granted, you don't have to be a musician to benefit from music therapy. I know we've mentioned that in past episodes of the show. I do have another story about a patient who happened to play the piano from memory. She was pretty far along in her Alzheimer's disease process and didn't really remember much of her life or even where she was sometimes. But sit her in front of the piano, lo and behold, this woman could play any song from memory.
Really?
Yeah, and I was actually able to take videos of this patient playing all of her songs, all of her favorite songs, and leave that as a legacy for her family.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was more than audio. You actually got video and seeing her
video
playing it.
and audio.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet her family, you know, must love that.
I think it might have been hard for them to watch at this point. You know, the patient was still alive when I gave them the CD.
Yeah.
But I know and I think that it will be a treasure, you know, once she's not with us anymore. And the family has those memories to recall and to appreciate and remember the happy moments that she had towards the end of her life.
Wow.
Yeah.
When she played these songs, I mean, were there any particular songs that really she knew very well that were kind of her staples, her go-to?
Her go-tos were Jingle Bells.
Jingle Bells.
And
all right.
a tune that
Solid.
I can't think of the name of. But she would always revert back to that song. And sometimes it was funny. She would get started playing one song and then it would kind of just revert back to this one
Slowly
song.
but surely, yeah,
Right,
just
right.
kind of
You
from
could
one to
see
another.
that memory impairment slipping through, you know, but it was just still amazing, you know, the musical memory and the power of music, the way we remember the music when we can't even remember certain details of our lives.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Like names, even faces. But somehow, yeah, and you just start playing a note or two and then it turns into a whole song. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
crazy.
When we return, we'll continue our discussion about our work as music therapists here in Southeast Florida. Stick around. We'll be right back after these commercials.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, But we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer. Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show.
Good evening. You are listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We are your guest hosts, Elisa Avon and Brian Halloway, filling in for Bree Beynon. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, we're having an informal discussion about our work as music therapists here in Palm Beach and Broward counties. Before the break, we were sharing some of our most memorable stories throughout our work here as music therapists in Southeast Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We shared a few stories from my internship and, from your work in the field together. But I think, Lisa, you had a couple questions that we were going to bring up.
Yeah, I was going to
right?
ask, what have been your most challenging moments, Brian, as a music therapist?
There have been many. Oh, boy. I would definitely say my internship had its fair share of moments, because you're still trying to, you learn about music therapy, and of course you do some things, but in a pretty safe environment in school. But when you go out there and you do it as an intern, especially when you don't have anyone supervising you and you're doing it on your own, you run into a few situations that you don't really expect to. I remember one situation in particular. The details aren't super sharp, but I remember definitely, oh my goodness, it was a client that I had seen a few times, and he had a habit of getting very agitated, and so trying to be very sensitive to that and not have that build and grow, and but still incorporating the music, but sometimes getting him to a place where we could do music was a little tricky. I remember one time where I was trying to bring him to a portion of the nursing home, and I was trying to, he was in a wheelchair, and I tried to bring him over to the activity room where nobody was there, and he got very upset at that process. He started to get out of his wheelchair and just started shouting at the top of his lungs, just like nonsense, nothing like very, articulately, and here I'm thinking, oh no. You're like, what are you going to do? I have to redirect him and bring him back to this calm state. And I'm still kind of getting used to my music. I'm not totally off book yet. Meanwhile, just sweat just starts pouring down my face, because you're still trying to get used to it, and figure out what to do.
Right.
Anyhow, I do manage to redirect him in a way and then bring him back in his wheelchair. And the session was pretty short from there on, because his agitation did increase, and so we decided, okay, maybe this isn't going to be appropriate for him in the end. But oh boy, that was a memory, all right. Yeah. But what about for you, though, Lisa? What have you had any challenging moments in your time in the field, or has everything just been peachy keen, just fun, easy, and breezy?
Definitely not. Definitely
Yeah,
not. I can't think of a specific story, but I will say one of the most challenging things about being a music therapist is the fact that a lot of people in the community still don't know what music therapy is or aren't familiar with music therapy
Yes.
as a profession. And so having to just constantly educate and advocate for myself, as even, you know, within the field that I work in, having to kind of explain and justify what I'm doing and why I'm there. And so that's a little bit of a challenge. You know, sometimes you'll walk into a facility and, you know, of course I have my guitar with me, and, you know, residents will be like, "Oh, are you here to play music?" And I have to constantly say, "Oh,
Right.
no, I'm just, you know, here to visit a friend." Or,
Oh, it's the music lady.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
Great.
Or what do you
Are
have in
here
that bag there? Is that
Yeah.
a cello?
Oh,
or
is that a cello?
a violin? I've had so many weird things that people think my guitar is.
When they see it's a guitar in your back, they're like, "Oh, is that a weapon of some sort?" Like,
yeah,
people's
I've had
minds just like
weapon.
run to the
most
weirdest.
bizarre thing I had a person ask me was, it was a rainy day actually, and I walked in with my guitar case, and this resident of a facility said, "Doesn't look like you're gonna get much use out of that today." And I was like, "Why?" And she was like, "You can't play tennis in the rain." And I was like, "It's a guitar."
It
I
is
could-
a
and she goes,
giant tennis
well,
racket.
in that case, you can play that inside, but, you know, you better not use those tennis rackets. I'm like, how do you think this is a tennis racket?
Yeah, I mean the ratio is a little much. It's about 4 feet tall. I mean that's
Yeah.
you know, that's a big tennis racket for anybody.
Right. But no, just like constantly having people ask, you know, are you going to perform? You know, what are you here for? What are you
Yes.
doing? And then not wanting to go into the whole spiel of like, "Oh, I'm a music therapist," and then that's a 20-minute conversation, you know?
Right.
But then at the same time wanting to advocate and educate about our field, because the more we do talk about it, the more people will know about it. And I'm very passionate about advocating and
Yeah.
educating.
Absolutely.
But it can be exhausting after a while.
Yes, a long day of, you know, I think the trickiest moments are when you're very confined with time. You know, in school, they even prepared us for this. They
Right,
call
the
it
elevator speech.
Elevator speech, exactly, where you have literally the time it would take to go through a couple floors on an elevator, and someone's question is, "So what's this whole music therapy thing these kids are doing these days?" And then you have to like, "Oh God, where do I start?" You know, it's just such a wide concept of different, you know, things, you know, between what it takes to become a music therapist and all the populations you can work with and all the types of tools you can use, you know.
Right.
How do you
How
explain
do you summarize that in a few minutes?
without, you know, going on a deep journey somewhere? It's just like, whoa.
You know, the best memory I have of this is my dad, who's actually probably out there watching right now.
Hi, Dad.
He used to keep a little definition of what music therapy was in his wallet.
Oh
and
my
so when
gosh.
his coworkers would ask, you know, what is your daughter doing, or what is she studying for school, he would open his wallet and pull out this little sentence that had the concise definition of what is music therapy.
I'm imagining, was it like, it looked like one of those, like, the way your hands were shaving, it seemed like a fortune cookie type,
It
like
was a
little tiny print.
Probably a little longer than a fortune cookie. It was
Okay.
kind of all folded up.
You're just like unfolding it and being
He'll probably
like,
correct me on the
"Music
details of the story
therapy."
later.
Oh, yes,
but,
yeah, I'm sure.
but yeah, I mean, really having to be really clear and quick with your definition of what music therapy is. And I actually saw a great video that someone posted on Facebook earlier today that described what we do really, really clearly and really well. And he kind of related it to psychotherapy, and, you know, a psychotherapist uses words and speech and talk to help patients, you know, meet their goals and to work through whatever therapeutic process they're
Right.
working with. And just, you know, you wouldn't call you and I talking right now necessarily therapy, but
Right.
they're using their words to achieve a goal.
Exactly,
And so
which is the concept.
Yeah, so he was kind of comparing that with music therapy, and, you know, as music therapists, we're using music. That's our tool. We're working on a specific goal that a patient or client has. Whereas, you know, if you're just playing music, or, you know, you're listening to music, that can be therapeutic. Absolutely, just as speech can be therapeutic.
Right.
But it's not therapy, because you're not having a therapy service by a trained professional who's gone to an accredited university and all of that stuff.
Right,
So
right,
I thought that
right.
was a really interesting and clear explanation. And
That is true. I mean, that's what's nice. I think the tricky thing for me, I know when I was first trying to think of how to explain music therapy, the hardest part was how do I use something that maybe people already know, and then maybe flip it on its head and say, actually, and then you by the way, you insert music instead, and that's a great way to do it. Talk as psychotherapy, and then but instead of talk, try using music or elements of music, like elements of talk or speech, and then go from there to work on the same goal, and then it lines right up. So
Right.
that's
I like the
great.
transfer to physical therapy as well because my boss actually came up with this transfer, and I really thought it was a wonderful explanation that, everyone benefits from exercise, and physical therapists use exercises in their work. But not everyone needs physical therapy, just in the same way that not every person needs music therapy.
Right.
But
right.
everyone can benefit from listening to music and engaging in a musical activity.
I think that brings up a thought of, I know a lot of times on a lark, people, will see you're a music therapist and they'll say, oh, I could really use some music therapy right now.
Right.
And, that's the perfect point of like, well, if you need to meet certain goals, it's, that same idea with it though.
Absolutely. Or, sometimes even when I'll call patients to remember to tell them about the music therapy service, a lot of times their first impression or thought of what I do is, oh, you go in and see my mom and put headphones on her and play music for her.
Right. Yeah.
So
you hit the play and the stop on the boombox.
Right. It's like, I didn't go to school for 4.5 years to learn how to hit play and stop in a boombox.
Not for nothing. This really, yeah.
It's a real thing, I promise.
I really worked really hard at this, I swear. And got a degree in everything.
So speaking of that musical component to what we do, Brian, how has your relationship to music as a music therapist and as a musician, first and foremost, changed throughout your work?
That's kind of the inevitable. It will change, I feel like, when you get into this work, because the pro side being you get exposed to a lot of music, maybe music you would have never listened to outside of your norm, your comfort zone. Before, I don't think, honestly, and this is true, before working as a music therapist, I never heard a Beatles song. I'd never, really never. I didn't
my
even,
gosh.
I just never was like, oh yeah, I know the reference of the Beatles, but I didn't actually hear the music, or at least say, oh yeah, that's a Beatles song. Of course, Let It Be, that stuff. You can't avoid that. But anyway, so yeah, I got exposed to a lot of different types of music, all different genres, different languages, different styles, decades, all of that. But at the same time, I know that a tricky thing for me personally was trying to draw the line between keeping music for myself and then keeping music for my clients, because that line gets a little blurred sometimes when, if you have maybe some spare time and then you really should be working on a song that was requested by your client, and oh man, it's been a week or so, I really should get to that, but you're trying, well, I'd like to do some music for me though in the off time, I really want to do my own thing, but then you feel bad, and so you end up learning the client's music, and then you kind of miss out on doing what you enjoy, which is the whole point.
Right.
Music.
So music becomes work in a sense.
Yes, right.
So it is really important to take that time to honor yourself as a musician and to play and practice your music for fun and for pleasure.
Yeah.
I know with me, I've had to really limit the time that I spend listening to music for pleasure, because a lot of times throughout my day, I'm just so flooded with music and not my music that I just want silence.
Yeah.
Brian can attest to that.
But music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about that. Too much of anything is not good. At some point, it's okay to kind of take a break from it, so you can appreciate it again.
I've found myself having to either drive with talk radio like this, what you're listening to now, or in complete silence, because the music is very stimulating, and especially when you've been around it all day.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a little give and take.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it is really crucial that you pay attention to that, as a music therapist. It's similar to, a burnout. You don't want to go too much into thinking too much about work. It's so hard. It's a lot of music therapy is kind of keeping that balance between, work-life balance and also personal music versus work music, and, all the challenges that come with that.
Right, maintaining that level of musicianship for your patients, but also keeping it for yourself as well.
Yeah.
When we return, we'll continue our discussion about our work as music therapists here in Southeast Florida. Stick around. We'll be right back after these commercials.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer. Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show.
Good evening. You are listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We are your guest hosts, Elisa Avon and Brian Hallilay, filling in for Bree Beynon. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're having an informal discussion about our work as music therapists here in Palm Beach and Broward counties. Before the break, we were talking about our relationship to music and how that's changed as music therapists working in the field.
Absolutely, yeah. I think part of what kind of helped for me to kind of separate personal versus client music was what we ultimately ended up doing, which was create a two-person band that we could do our own songs and play our own gigs and do things like that with.
Yeah.
It kind of making it more of a goal to work on over time. So the group that we have is Counseled and Composed, and we do all sorts of different, music from, of course, 60s on up to current day, all acoustic covers and all that.
We've done weddings, birthday parties now, and actually doing an event tomorrow at a local library.
Yeah, coincidence.
At J. Turner Moore Memorial Library here in Manalapan. So if you're available, we'll be there from 6 to 8. Let's come support our community library.
That's right. Show your support.
So, but like Brian said, we came up with an acoustic duo, the two of us, about 2 years or so ago.
Has it really been 2 years?
Yeah, it's been 2 years. I know, it's crazy. We came up with the name because both of us are kind of really into this Myers-Briggs personality test,
Type
which
indicator.
it's a psychological test that determines your personality based on 4 different characteristics. I think the first is introversion versus extroversion, and then intuition versus sensing. So like if you kind of figure things out more on an intuitive or emotional level versus taking things in from your environment.
Right. From what your senses can gather.
Right.
And all that.
The next letters are either feeling or
Thinking.
Thinking.
Yeah.
So whether you base your decisions off of your emotions or off of logic. And then the last letters are judging or perceiving. That's that's either being really judging would be like being very structured, being very organized, having to have everything follow a plan and a structure, and perceiving being more like go with the flow, more spontaneous, that sort of stuff. So once you take the test, which is, about 70 questions or so, at least the online version. I'm not sure if the real psychological version is different, but
I think the real psychological version that I know of, and for anybody out there, just go ahead and take the quiz. It doesn't take more than a couple minutes, and you learn so much about yourself just by doing. It's a multiple choice.
yeah, I've
type
never felt so
quiz.
validated in my entire life.
Who knew that 4 little letters
Yeah.
would explain so much of your own behavior behind stuff that you never thought about
Yeah,
before.
Definitely. So
know?
once you take the test, you're assigned these 4 letters.
Yes.
And each type, I think there's 16 different personality types,
Yes.
has a name. And so mine is the counselor, and Brian's is the composer. And so that's how we kind of formed the name of our acoustic duo that we perform as in the area, which is Counseled and Composed. And we kind of want to talk a little bit about the differences between, our work as music therapists and our outside gigs as musicians, and kind of how those two things are different, and some things that are crossover.
Yes. Yeah, I think, there's definitely a lot of bleed over, obviously, with music being the core of it. Kind of like that Venn diagram of what's in the middle, what's definitely separating. But, I mean, we had a recent gig not too long ago where a lot of experiencers were like, oh my goodness, this would be so different if it were a music therapy session.
Absolutely.
Like, Elisa, what were some of the things that we came up with that we realized?
I remember thinking, there was a person who came up to us during the gig and asked us for a specific song.
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh gosh, well, I need to look through my book and see if I have this song, or I need to write it down so I can learn it. And then I'm like, no,
wait a minute.
I don't have to do that. We came here to play the songs that we were asked to sing. And I don't have to look through my repertoire and figure out what's the next closest song I can play to this song.
So is there a genre? Is there a group that I know that would somehow
or
tangentially...
pull it up on my phone and play it on YouTube, if I don't
Right.
know it. So that was a really interesting.
I think we should note that the person who had requested was not
the person who had asked us.
Right. It wasn't
to play the song. It was just
like
a party attendee.
Yeah, party attendee who was like, play Freebird. It was like one of those kind of things where like, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that.
Right. Or like, a little kid came up to us and started dancing, and, I was tempted to like give her an instrument and like incorporate her in the session as if she were like a family member. Yeah. It's just, you kind of have to put on the musician hat and take off the therapist hat. But another thing that I found odd was that, we were tipped.
Oh yeah, that's right. The
they gave
tipping
us
thing.
food.
Yes, which is definitely not
Definitely
allowed.
a no-no as a music therapist.
Big no-no.
Yeah.
And it happens where, you're in the field and they palm you a 20 and you're like, wait a minute, you just finished this beautiful session, and they want to show their appreciation, and maybe that's just their way of showing it to you. But, I think we both run into,
You have to say no.
you got to say no.
Yeah.
And there's no way around it.
A lot of times, if I can see that it's going to really hurt my therapeutic rapport with a family or patient, we are able to donate the money to our program,
Yes, and
which is a really nice alternative.
It's a beautiful segue to go,
Yes.
hey, thank you so much for this money. I'm going to donate it in your name to a cause.
to our program.
To our program,
to keep
exactly.
these services happening.
So that way, you're right, it doesn't take away the gift that they want to give, and
Right.
instead turns it into something that can be used to help support the program that they support. You know,
Right.
it kind of just makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And it was such a weird thing for me to accept, a tip,
Yeah.
and to kind of put that hesitation, and that wall of ethical boundary was no
Yeah.
longer there because I didn't have my music therapist hat on.
Yes, yes. Because, I think, working as a music therapist in the field, you're trying to deal with a lot of situations that could become ethical dilemmas. Again, that class that we went to at conference, I remember distinctly Lauren bringing up being tipped and how just do not accept it because it changes the relationship and all that, and the expectation gets set, and then before you know it, it's, the money keeps going. You don't want to do that.
Right.
So in a lot of these kind of situations where it's like, oh, okay, you got to constantly have that in the back of your mind, like how you're going to handle that. But when you're a performing musician, it's kind of more the opposite. It's more you're expected to, make it a good time, make it a fun experience for the family. However that is, share some personal stories, which you would probably never do as a music therapist.
Yeah.
Or like they offered having some food.
Right.
It was a birthday party, which was a really cool gig. Anyway, just getting to play at somebody's birthday party, but for a whole 60s set that we had, and a lot of Beatles songs. But and then they had offered us some food, and we're like, oh well, I guess we could. Yeah, I'm a little hungry. Sure, why not? And then you had to turn off that music therapy switch and be like, oh yeah, I guess I can accept that.
Right. Right.
So
before we have to end the show, I know that a lot of you have been enjoying the music that we've been doing here on Palm Beach Music Therapy Connection. So Brian and I are going to play a song before we say goodnight for the evening. So
cold as the night without you here, just your absence ringing in my ears. Hard is the heart that feels no fear, 'cause without the bad the good disappears. Long is the road that leads me home, and longer still when I walk alone. Bitter is the thought of all that time spent searching for something I'll never find. Take this burden away from me, bury it before it buries me. Many are the days I've wanted to cease, lay myself down and find some relief. Heavy is the head that gets no sleep, and carry our lives around in our memories. So take away this apathy, bury it before it buries me. Steady is a hand that's come to terms with the lessons it has had to learn. I've seen the things that I must do, but Lord, this road is meant for two. So when I am waiting here for you, take my hand and set me free. Take my burdens and bury them deep. Take this burden away from me, bury it before, bury it before, bury it before it buries me.
thank you so much for listening tonight to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. Again, I'm Elisa Avon. This is Brian Hallilay. Our acoustic duo in the area is called Counseled and Composed, and you can reach out to us on Facebook.
And gig us through Gig Salad as well, if you want to. Thanks, everybody, so much for listening. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Thank you for listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We hope you enjoyed today's program and discovered new ways to bring music, art, and dance into your home or workplace. Please find a copy of today's show at pbmti.com. If you have any questions for our guest or myself, please email me at Bree, that's B-R-E-E, at pbmti.com, or call the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute at 561-747-9944. Tune back in next week for an all-new live show. See you then.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and